Okay, so happy almost Thanksgiving. If you're in my neck of the woods, my part of the world, you are about to celebrate Thanksgiving, perhaps. And so, of course, I thought this would be a good time to talk about being thankful or the emotional state of gratitude. Gratitude is an emotional state. And I know this notion of being thankful. Oh, maybe it feels exhausting at this time. It's like, oh, it's all we talk about. We're giving thanks, Thanksgiving. Yes, okay, we do that. Maybe your family or friends giving group goes around the table and says one thing that you all are grateful for. Maybe you don't. I just, I think we do that from time to time in our family. And I remember as a kid, it was like, okay, yeah, cue the eye roll. Can we just get down to eating some turkey, please? And I think people have all kinds of different emotional reactions to that practice if you do it. So I wanted to dig into gratitude a little bit, whether or not you guys are going to go around the table and give, share something that you're grateful for. Why not take this time to just think about that for yourself? Because today I am going to talk about gratitude, what it means, gratitude practices. Like, why do we even talk about these? What are the benefits? Is gratitude practice toxic positivity? And how can you incorporate the science of gratitude into your life? Now, my perfectionist out there, really pay attention, because if you are a perfectionist, you may have a tendency to focus on what isn't going well, which has a negative impact on our mental health. And gratitude practice is perfect for my perfectionists out there to help shift that. I'm Dr. Kit Slies. I'm a life coach and licensed psychologist here to inspire perfectionists and anxious achievers to feel calm and confident while holding clear boundaries. So, what is gratitude? Gratitude is a moral emotion or a social emotion. Other emotions that might fall into this category are things like guilt and shame, which those two are not the same. I'll maybe link some of my videos that talk about the differences between those two. Empathy and sympathy could also be considered a moral emotion where you're taking into consideration how other people are feeling and responding to that. Guilt and shame, you're responding to something that you have done that maybe violates the unwritten social contract, right? So more emotions help us distinguish between right and wrong, but they're also being guided by that unwritten social contract that just helps us live and function well with others. It helps us live a social life. It helps us function well in society, which has its own psychological benefits, right? Gratitude is a distinct emotion. It's not just being happy. There are neural correlates of gratitude, okay? Some of them are activation in our prefrontal cortex and our anterior cingulate cortex. And I'll go, it's not so important that you know exactly what those do or why it's important they get activated. But what I will say about that is that activation is also similar to what we see during for the neural correlates of things like emotion regulation. Okay, like inhibiting emotional responses such as anger, inhibiting the thing that you really when you're angry, but maybe would not serve you or other people well. Okay. So it allows us to, those neural correlates are similar to being able to, again, emotionally regulate, not act impulsively. And it's also what we see in our meditators out there. Okay. We see those parts of the brain activated in meditators. Um, the neural correlates of that indicate an ability to combat stress and fight the negative impacts of stress that we see in the brain. So, in other words, if you're in a state of gratitude from a neural perspective, you are not in a state of emotional dysregulation. And what the research tells us is that people who experience gratitude, okay, and gratitude is different from optimism. So if you're an optimist, you expect good outcomes, versus gratitude is that you're having an emotional experience from recognizing the good outcomes that are already there. And what the research tells us is that people who experience gratitude have higher levels of well-being. And beyond that, so this is where gratitude practices come in. So gratitude practice came as part of this movement, and now this whole branch of psychology known as positive psychology. So historically, traditionally, up until this point, psychology had focused on the illness, the psychological illnesses that we experience. So we focused on researching what does it mean to be psychologically ill, and how do we treat that, fix that. Positive psychology said this movement, and again, this whole area of psychology now that is backed by research as well, said, hey, let's actually focus on researching what it means to be psychologically well. What does that look like? How do we define that? And can we cultivate that and build up these psychological muscles in folks, whether they have illness as a treatment, or in just the general population of folks, so that we can cultivate this psychological resilience and these psychologically well traits, right? And so gratitude practices developed out of this. And the research on gratitude practices, some of it's mixed, but I think overall, what we see is that you can cultivate the benefit of, so folks who are just naturally more grateful, we can cultivate some of the benefits that they see, that psychological well-being, that happiness, combating depression, burnout, anxiety, things like that. It is not perfect, right? It's not, if you are depressed and go out and practice gratitude, are you going to cure yourself necessarily? But is it a lovely tool when used appropriately? Yes. But we do want to be careful of, is this notion of toxic positivity that I mentioned earlier, right? So toxic positivity is when we discount the full range of emotions that include difficult emotions, maybe like sadness or fear or anxiety or depression or anger. And we say, hey, just don't feel those things or get over them, and let's just be happy instead. As if to say that those emotions or feeling states are not an important part of the human experience, because they are. So we don't want to use gratitude practices in this toxic way. We want to cultivate this feeling of being thankful and seeing the good outcomes in our life. But that is not to say that you are not allowed to feel sad or anxious or fearful or any of these things, or angry. Those emotions are still valid and important. The gratitude practice that I really like, because of some of the more rigorous research around it, and because it's a really accessible practice, is one called 3 Good Things, developed by Martin Seligman. And so if you are using this practice in a non-toxic positivity way, okay, that is when we can see some of the benefits of it. And the reason for that, I'll tell you the practices in a minute, I'll tell you how to apply it in your life. But the reason for that is because our brains can get into a state of focusing on the negative, on negative outcomes. This may be true of you if you are just, your personality is a little bit more pessimistic. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, okay? Or if you are experiencing more stress, if you're feeling anxious or depressed. If we think about our nervous system and the way that it is supposed to function, part of our nervous system is designed to perceive threats in the environment so that our bodies can respond appropriately to that. So we're already primed to pick out threats, but our brain doesn't necessarily know the difference between something that was just stressful or didn't feel good as opposed to a life-threatening threat. When we're depressed, anxious, sad, stressed, we are going to focus on that negative information a little bit more because our body thinks that it is protecting us. It is prioritizing that negative information so that we can prepare for the next wave of attacks, right? Or to deal with the situation, that whatever the negative stuff is that we need to deal with. So we can get into this place of sort of hyper focusing on the negative, particularly when we're stressed. So again, we don't want to like ignore that information and like pretend like everything is going well. We still want to cope with that stuff. We want to say, hey, what's within our control? What about this like negative stuff that's happening that I have agency and can control over and can change and problem solve and act on? That is healthy to do. And you need to feel your feelings in order to be able to do that. You need to know what's bothering you in order to know what to tend to. You also want to say what's out of my control that I don't need to hyper focus on. But the gratitude practice and the 3 good things practice fits into that by taking some of that over focus on the negative, kind of turning up the volume and saying like, hey, there is still stuff in our life that is good. It's not to say that this other stuff isn't happening. It's just to say, hey, let's get a little bit more balance in what we're focusing on so that maybe don't need to feel that quite that level of stress or depression or anxiety that just isn't serving us so much. So it's a little bit of neural programming. And again, the research on gratitude practices and Seligman's 3 good things in particular is pretty cool. I mean, they studied it in healthcare workers. So I teach this a lot too. I work with a lot of healthcare workers, nurses, physicians, that sort of thing. And I teach it to folks when they're burned out a lot because they have studied it specifically in that population. And what we find is that 1 to 2 weeks of this practice shows good results 6 to 12 months later, with some research indicating an effect size slightly better than putting somebody on an antidepressant. It's not to say that this should replace an antidepressant. There is time and a place for some people for medication, okay? But it's just saying that this is potentially a powerful exercise. And so what you do for 1 to 2 weeks is every night before bed, write down 3 good things that happened to you. It is important that you do it before bed and that you write them down just because of the way that our brains take in and consolidate information. It seems to be a little bit more effective this way. But if you do it at a different time of day or if you don't write it down, experiment for yourself and see if it works just as well, okay? But if you're going to do the practice the way that it's been researched, you would write it down for 1 to 2 weeks. And it's important that you write down the good thing and that you also write down or reflect on why that good thing happened, what caused it. And this just helps your brain to really shine the light on the good thing a little bit more so that it's really getting more, it's more concrete in your brain and it's helping that the neural pathways shift their focus a little bit. I also like to ask my clients to reflect on how that good thing felt or how it feels to reflect on it, to name those emotions. And that's because I talk a lot about the importance of emotional awareness. A lot of the folks that I work with, and most of us just in general, we get disconnected from our emotions. We do that because we're so focused on the needs of others. We don't have the time of day to focus on ourselves. We're scrolling through Facebook and social media all day long, right? We're not focusing on how we're actually feeling. And so I use this exercise as a way to foster that emotional awareness as well. There's all sorts of benefits to that level of emotional awareness that we don't have the time for today. But so that's the exercise. You do it for 1 to 2 weeks. And then if you want to continue, you can, or you stop it and if you found benefit from it, you let the benefit sink in, and then you do it again as like a booster shot, right? Like a vaccination booster shot for a couple of nights if you're starting to feel stressed out again. Okay. I have done this exercise personally many times. I'm currently doing it in the morning just because that's when it fits in my schedule right now. So that's 3 good things, which is the gratitude practice and the science of gratitude, again, just tells us, it helps us feel more psychologically well when we can stop and recognize, hey, this thing feels good. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about 3 good things is that they don't need to be mind-blowing things. They can be like really simple joys throughout the day. You know, it could be like, okay, one of my good things was this cup of tea or coffee, okay? And you know, the causal thing and that the reason why it was good was because, well, I made the cup of coffee. I decided to do that, so that was part of the cause of it. And then also the other causal factor in it was, well, I let myself stop and notice that I was enjoying it. And then I reflected on it later in this moment, right? And it felt calming. I was able to just kind of just have a moment of just feeling like I wasn't inundated with all the demands of the world. I was just here and present with my tea. And that was my good thing. So they can be really simple things. These are not mind-blowing things. And the way that you know that this practice is working is usually after about 3 or 4 days, you're going to start to seek out in your environment, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to put as my good things for tonight? So you can see how that just gets you to shift your focus a little bit. You can still be putting out fires between your good things if that is your reality, but it just gets you to break up the day a little bit and feel this positive emotion. And other positive emotions may be associated with that gratitude as well. Okay. So that's good thing. That's my spiel here for you on in this time of giving thanks. Why gratitude, why feeling gratitude is important, why stopping to reflect on what is going well is important. This is not just discount other emotions that you are feeling. It's just that you are this whole complete human, and we are just balancing that out, making sure that your brain is balancing these positive feelings, even if there are other difficult feelings that you are feeling. So as we come up on this Thanksgiving, or if you're watching this after Thanksgiving, take some time to just reflect on what you are grateful for. Maybe incorporate the 3 good things practice. If you decide to do it, I do highly recommend just putting like a journal or something on your pillow to remind you to do it before bed. So you don't have to like remember to do it. That perspective memory, you don't have to remember it. You don't have to set another alarm on your phone. I know that that wouldn't even show up on my phone because I've got my sleep do not disturb on before bed. But just put something on your pillow to remind you to do it. And it can be really quick, like just spend a couple of minutes on it. It doesn't have to be like this whole 30-minute thing, just a couple of minutes. And just observe for yourself if it works for you. So I hope that you found this helpful as a way to sort of cultivate that calm and confidence within yourself. You're setting boundaries for yourself by giving yourself the boundary of, hey, I'm going to do this for myself in the evening or the morning or whenever you get around to it. And if you do have a Thanksgiving practice of going around and saying one thing you're grateful for, maybe you want to share with your loved ones some of the benefits for it, and that this is not a a toxic positivity thing, but it just might help us feel better in this moment, especially if you're around family that maybe it's not always easy for you in those holiday celebrations to be around those folks, and maybe this will be a way to feel some positive emotions in that setting. I hope that you found this helpful, and I'll see you next time.